Okay, I had several requests to demonstrate the Fieldstrip. So this is the standard maintenance procedure for the handgun. So we're not doing anything special. We're not modifying anything. We are not manufacturing anything. This is strictly by the book maintenance for cleaning and normal care. So the first thing we want to do is we want to, of course, always make sure the gun is unloaded, the magazine has been removed, and the gun is unloaded. When you can see all the way through it, that's a good thing. So the first thing we need to do is remove the takedown pin, which is part of the slide stop control. And on this gun, it is pretty tight. When you get it, if you get a brand new one of these, it's going to be really, really tight. But I've got a little tool here that I'm going to use to just press on that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to line up two little marks, two dimples, by moving the slide back about 1/4 of an inch. All right, so we get these two dimples lined up, and then we need to remove the pin. So after you've taken this gun down about 100 times, you probably can just pull the pin out. But I'm going to push on it from the back side with this polymer tool and push it through enough so that I can get my fingers around it. So once you get it loose, and then you can pull it out. So there's our takedown pin. And once you do that, you can just simply pull the slide right off the pistol. Cleaning the frame, pretty straightforward. You would just, brush it out with a brush, wipe it with a swab, whatever you want to do. See the rails there on the inside of the frame? That's where the slide rides. Again, this is the inverted design, like a CZ. Set the frame aside. We don't need to mess with it right now. All right, so I'm going to focus on the slide because that's where the real work is, and that's where everything's quite a bit different. In my initial part 1 review, I talked about the different components. So you have this locking block here that's quite large, and in that locking block we have our recoil spring and what I would call a guide rod, but that's called a ram. And then up front, you can see just the bottom of the part right now, there's a locking valve. Okay, so before we go any further, you're going to need a special tool, but one you can easily make yourself, and that is basically a paper clip. You can also use a very small Allen wrench or a very, very tiny punch, but paper clip is easy to use, and it's relatively soft metal, which is kind of important because we don't want to scratch up the finish on the gun if we can help it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and it's good to use a cleaning mat that's, this neoprene with some foam under it, like a regular cleaning mat, because you're going to want to put some down pressure. Let the gun dig into the mat and give it some traction so that you can compress this spring. The spring is relatively heavy, so we need to compress the spring and move it all the way forward, and we're going to do that by basically pinching and grabbing a hold of this locking block and moving it forward. All the way. What you can't see is that there's a hole through the rod, or ram as they call it, and I'm going to insert my paper clip through that and then gently let it come back and catch. That takes the tension off the spring. So now we've compressed the spring and we're holding it in place. Okay, the next thing we need to do is remove a small pin located right here, and that goes through the back of the ram, or guide rod, if you want to use the term guide rod. It goes through the back of that. There's a hole where that pin goes through, and that locks it to, or that anchors it to the locking block. So this common little tool on all your bottles of cleaner, I found is a perfect fit, and it pushes that pin through very easily. Once you've done this several times, that pin will just about fall out on its own. You could also use another piece of paper clip like this, or a small punch, or even a tiny little Allen wrench, anything that'll fit in that hole. Okay, we've got the pin out. Now we can move the locking block and barrel back to the rearward position, and the locking block simply lifts out. Now there is a small plunger right here in the locking block that holds it with some friction into place, but it's easy to just pop that right out of there. Okay, now we need to compress the spring a little bit more, remove the paper clip, and then gently ease the spring back. So I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to obscure it from view because I'm going to cover it with my hand in case, it wants to fly around somewhere. Safety first, right? So we compress it compress it a little bit more, take out what was holding it, and then let it come back. Again, this is a fairly stout spring, so it's got a little bit of tension, and this is a non-captured spring. One of the things important to look at here on this ram is the angle or bevel at the end, and that's important. So if you were looking at the gun right side up with the slide, it needs to go in this way, oriented this way. So the bevel needs to be pointed straight up because it's used to actuate this guy. It's also important to have it oriented properly because you see that small hole right there. That's the one I was referring to with that little pin that goes through there in the locking block. All right, now we can take the locking valve out by, I'm just going to put my thumb on the barrel, turn it over, falls right out. And now the barrel can be slid out the front like you would for pretty much any gun, like a 1911, for example. And it is just like a piece of square bar stock, isn't it? Except for a couple of notches. This is the notch where the locking block is going to ride, and this is the notch where the locking valve rides. And you can see what looks like a grind mark. It looks like it's probably actually either ground or filed, and that is some of the hand fitting that's done at the factory. So they obviously had a high spot right there that they needed to take a little material out of. So that's it. That is the basic disassembly. It's relatively easy once you've done it a couple times, but there is more to it, obviously, than a normal striker-fired or even most common hammer-fired guns. Reassembly of the slide is basically just everything in the opposite order. Okay, so slide the barrel back in, and then we're going to take this locking valve, and one end of it has a notch with a change in elevation. You can see that. So that has to be oriented to fit down into the notch that we saw in the barrel. Basically, the high side of that goes forward. I'm dropping it in like that. And if it goes all the way flush, you've got it in right. If you don't have it in right, it won't be flush. Pretty simple. We need to put the ram and recoil spring back in. But again, as I said, it's critical that the ram be properly oriented. So it has to be like this. When we're looking upside down on the slide, we want that bevel straight up toward us. Okay? And you want to put the flat end of the spring over the ram so that it seats nicely there at the back on that shoulder. Now here's a little hack that I discovered or created for myself, and I will be happy to share it with you, because pushing on this really small, skinny ram and compressing that spring while trying to feed the ram into the hole and all of that is a bit tricky. And quite honestly, it's a great way to bruise the inside of your hand if you do it a few times. So I've created a little hack that I'll share here with you. Take the locking block, turn it upside down. So normally it gets oriented into the slide thusly, right? We're going to turn it upside down, and we're just going to use it to capture the back end of this rod and give us something bigger and easier to hold to push. Okay, one thing I do need to do is I need to sort of pre-collapse the spring enough to get the rod started into the hole. And I have found, this might be tricky to do on camera, sort of like patting my head and rubbing my stomach, but I need to just get it started in there. And then I can push this. There we go. to just get it past a little bit of resistance. Now I've got it all the way extended. Find that hole, get my paper clip back in there, and I can already see it's not perfectly square. But at least I've got it captured. But let me show you what I'm talking about. So you can see we're not where we need to be with the orientation of the ram. That bevel has been turned as I inserted it, and that happens more often than not. So I need to turn it so that this paper clip is level or square to the slide. Because that keeper is going to help to let us know when it's oriented properly. So that looks a lot better. Still not perfect, but it's really close. So that should be okay. All right, there's two reasons why that's really important. So the beveled end here, as I said, is going to interact with this locking valve. And that bevel needs to be there in order to push through and operate that locking valve. Because right now you can see that it is extended, and that's what stops it in the frame. The other thing that's very important about a proper orientation is that hole that we talked about right there. See that hole? So that hole has to match up with the hole in the locking block, and we have to get that little pin through it. All right, so we take the locking block now in proper orientation, and again, it has this little plunger right here, and we're just going to sort of put it in a little bit crooked and just let that plunger catch right here on this lip, on this cut, and push it in, turn it so that it's properly oriented. So now you can see that it's captured the barrel. That's what we want. So, and we're going to bring it forward. Now, I'm going to orient it to that hole. It's pretty easy to do. Get it lined up, and we're going to put this little pin back in. Okay, there we go. Pin is now in, and now I'm going to remove my keeper. So I'm going to again compress this spring as far as I can. Remove my keeper, and then gently let it come back. Again, that's under a lot of tension. There we go. The slide is now reassembled and ready to be put back on the frame. Okay, we get our slide back on the frame in the position to get the takedown pin put back in. Simply insert it, line it up with the hole, push it in, and we're done. Function test. There you go. You can really support the channel and help me keep content flowing by hitting like and being a subscriber. I'm on Patreon if you want to support me that way, and you usually will get early access to videos like this. Look in the description of this video and you'll see several discount codes and affiliate links. You can save significant money on products that I use and recommend. Or if you think this video was especially helpful to you, or you just want to say thanks, there's a button for that right below the video. It's like leaving a tip if you had good service. This is just an opinion. Thanks for watching.